The air inside the courthouse felt thick. It tasted like old floor wax and industrial bleach. It felt heavy with the weight of 1,000 broken promises. My name is Dorothy. I am a grandmother from a small town in Iowa. That morning, my legs felt like they were made of heavy gray stone. I could barely breathe. I stood by the courtroom doors. I watched 28 years of my marriage shrink. It was all becoming just a number on a legal paper. My heart was gumping. I looked at my hands. These are Iowa hands. They are lined with years of hard work. They had kneaded bread and scrubbed Arthur's dirty work clothes for decades. Now, those hands were shaking. I had to clench them into white-knuckled fists. I didn't want to collapse. I felt like a small smudge of ink about to be erased. Then the heavy oak doors swung open. I heard him before I saw him. Arthur has a specific walk. It is a heavy, confident strike of the heel on marble. That sound used to make me feel safe. It used to mean the provider was home. But today, it sounded like a predator moving through dry autumn leaves. He appeared in the yellow light of the hall. He was wearing a navy blue Italian suit. It was $3,000 of silk I had never seen before. He looked like a man who had already won. He looked like he had deleted me from his heart. But he was not walking alone. He had a prize. Tucked under his arm was a young woman. She was barely 25 years old. She wore a dress that was much too short for a house of law. She was everything I was not. She was young. Her face was unlined by worry. She was untouched by the sun-drenched labor of our family farm. But it was her face that stopped my blood. She wasn't just pretty. She was triumphant. She wore a smirk that looked like it was painted on with ice. That smirk told me everything. It said she had already slept in my sheets. She had already moved her clothes into my cedar closet. She owned my life. They stopped just inches from me. Arthur didn't look ashamed. He didn't have the decency to look sad. He looked at me with a terrifying kind of pity. I caught the scent of his cologne. It was sharp and metallic. It was the smell of a man who had traded his soul for a penthouse view. He leaned down. His face was inches from mine. His voice was a low, vibrating growl. It was a sound meant only for my ears to hear. "Look at you, Dorothy," he whispered. "You look tired. You look old. You look like a relic of a past that I have already burned to the ground." I tried to speak. My throat was a desert. My tongue felt like a piece of dry leather. I couldn't find a single word to say back. He leaned closer. His breath smelled of expensive gin. "Today is my best day. I spent 2 years moving the bricks of this empire while you played housewife. By the time the judge bangs that gavel, you won't have enough money for a bus ticket. I'm taking the house. I'm taking the savings. I'm taking everything. I'm erasing you, Dorothy. It's like you never even existed." He smiled. It was the coldest thing I had ever seen. My world started to spin. The young woman let out a tiny giggle. She reached up and smoothed his lapel. Her eyes locked on mine with a cold, predatory gleam. I felt a hot surge of tears. I felt the decades of my life turning into ash. I felt like a fool. I felt like a victim. I was seconds away from breaking. I was seconds from sinking to my knees. I wanted to beg him not to make me homeless. But then I felt a firm hand on my sleeve. My lawyer, Sarah, stepped forward. She didn't believe in smirks. She believed in fire and cold facts. She didn't look at Arthur. She didn't look at the girl. She looked directly into my eyes. Her gaze was a lifeline in a dark sea. "Dorothy," she said. Her voice cut the air like a blade. "Look at me. Ignore the noise. The noise is just a distraction to make you feel small. Did you do exactly what I told you? Did you go into the basement safe? Did you find the blue folder?" Sarah's eyes were searching mine. I remembered last night. I was on my knees in the dark. My fingers were fumbling with a lock. I remembered the heavy click of the door. I remembered the cold feel of the USB drive. I remembered the smell of old hidden papers, papers that were never meant for my eyes to see. I reached into my handbag. My fingers brushed the stiff edge of the blue folder. It wasn't just paper, it was a weapon. It was my truth. I looked at Arthur. His smirk flickered for a second. He saw me touch my bag. The girl looked at my lawyer. Confusion started to grow. I straightened my spine. The stone in my legs turned into iron. I stood at my full height. I nodded at Sarah. "I have everything," I whispered. Sarah's eyes lit up with a sharp brilliance. She turned toward the courtroom doors. She didn't look back as she spoke. Her voice rang through the hall. "Good," she said. "Then take a deep breath, Dorothy, because the show starts now. By noon, Arthur will wish he had never learned how to whisper." The bailiff called our names. The heavy oak doors creaked open. Arthur's face tightened. A shadow of doubt finally crossed his brow for the first time. But I was not shaking anymore. I walked through those doors with my head high. I was not a victim. I was a woman reclaiming her name.
Arthur thought he was the architect of my ruin. He didn't realize I had been watching him. He didn't know I had been counting every lie.
You see, a man like Arthur thinks a grandmother is invisible. He thinks we are too soft to fight. He thinks we don't understand the real world. He was about to learn a very expensive lesson. He was about to find out that a woman who builds a home can also take it apart. If you want to know how a blue folder destroyed a millionaire, stay right here. You need to hear what happened when the judge saw the truth. This is the story of how I lost a husband, but found my soul. And trust me, the ending is something you will never expect. In this section, we dive deep into the 28 years of history. To keep your watch time high, we focus on the emotional granny memories that build a massive bond with your audience. I kept my eyes forward as we entered the room, but my mind began to drift. It drifted back to the life that brought me to this cold place. You do not walk into a courtroom after 28 years without baggage. You carry a whole history in your chest. Every anniversary and every argument lives inside your heart. I met Arthur when I was young and full of hope. I was 21 years old. He was 23. He had a smile that could light up a room. Back then, we were renting a small place. The windows rattled in the Iowa wind. We counted every single dollar. We shared a single bowl of oatmeal some mornings. I truly believed love meant we were a team. I believed we were two halves of one whole. I gave him everything I had to give. I gave my youth. I worked 2 jobs while he dreamed of his company. I worked at the diner and cleaned houses. I put every cent into his dream of a construction firm. Our first office was just our garage. It smelled of sawdust and old motor oil. I sat at a folding table. I tracked every nail and every hammer we bought. When our family needed something steady, I was there. I became the anchor. I became the one who never complained. I never asked for applause or a gift. I was happy to see him succeed. I was proud when he bought his first company truck. I thought he was building a life for us. I was wrong. Somewhere along the way, the us became him. Success is like a slow-acting poison for some men.
It makes them forget the hands that help them climb.
He stopped seeing me as a partner. He started seeing me as a piece of furniture. I was something useful. I was something quiet. I was just there. He thought he could replace me. He thought he could pull the rug out from under me. He thought the house would still stand if I were gone. The feeling of being replaced did not happen overnight. It was not a sudden explosion. It started in little ways. It started like a slow leak in a roof. It started with the phone calls that he wouldn't take in front of me. It started with the late nights at the office that didn't make sense. I spent years making excuses for him. That is what wives do. We make excuses because we love the person. We want to believe the best of them. He began to come home later and later. He didn't smell like the shop anymore. He didn't smell like sawdust or hard work. He smelled like sharp cologne. It was a scent he never wore for me. It was a scent that belonged to a stranger. When I asked him where he had been, he snapped at me. His answers sounded practiced. They sounded like he was reading them off a card in his mind. He couldn't look me in the eye when he spoke. Then his phone started living face down on the table. The screen would go dark the moment I walked into the kitchen. He guarded it like a treasure. He would smile at that screen in a way that hurt. It was the kind of smile that does not come from family. It was a secret smile. I told myself I was being foolish. I told myself that every marriage has seasons. I told myself that the winter would eventually pass into spring. But deep down, I could feel a draft. It was like a cold wind blowing under a closed door. Something was moving through my home that didn't belong. That draft turned into a chill one Tuesday afternoon. I opened our mail by the kitchen sink. I saw a bank notice that didn't make any sense. The address was correct, but the bank was a stranger. It showed a balance change that was far too big to be a simple error. It was too quiet to be normal. It was too sudden to ignore. I stood there with the paper trembling in my hands. The sink was full of dishes. The afternoon light was slanting across the linoleum floor. My heart started thumping. It was trying to warn me before my mind could catch up. I waited for him to come home that night. I tried to keep my voice gentle. I tried to sound like a wife who just needed clarity. "Arthur," I said, "I found this paper in the mail. What is this account?" He didn't even look at the paper. He just looked at me with fire. He snapped at me so fast it was like a whip. He told me it was business, that I would not understand. He told me to stay in my lane. "Stop watching every penny like a watchdog, Dorothy," he sneered. He walked out of the room. He left me standing in the dark with my questions. I wanted to remind him why I watched the pennies. I watched them because I had to. I watched them so he could build his fancy empire. I was the one who stretched the groceries for years. I was the one who made sure the mortgage was paid on time. I did the work. But the look in his eyes told me a cruel truth. He did not respect my work anymore. He didn't see the value in my sacrifice. He resented it. He saw me as a burden. He saw me as a bill he didn't want to pay. After that night, little things started to disappear from our life. Money moved from one place to another. There were small withdrawals that I couldn't explain. There were new credit cards that arrived in his name only. When I tried to ask again, he would just laugh. He acted like I was being dramatic. He sighed like I was a weight he had to carry. I lay awake beside him in the dark. I listened to him breathe. I stared at the ceiling and thought about every sacrifice I had made for him. I realized then that the scariest part was not the cheating. The scariest part was the planning. He was building a trap while I was cooking dinner. A man who is planning will smile at you. He will kiss you on the forehead. He will tell you he loves you while he lights the match. By the time I admitted the truth, it wasn't a scream. It was a quiet sentence that settled in my bones. He is trying to destroy me. He wasn't just leaving. He was trying to leave me with absolutely nothing. He wanted to erase 28 years of my existence in one move. If I kept pretending, I would wake up one morning homeless. I would find my name erased from the house I had cleaned for decades. I did not confront him right away. I knew that if I spoke too soon, he would just hide the trail deeper. I had to be smart. I started to watch him quietly. I started to listen to the things he didn't say. I noticed how he dressed up on ordinary Tuesdays. He acted like he had somewhere important to be. He acted like his life was already happening somewhere else, and I was just a ghost in the hallway. I realized that if I wanted to survive, I had to stop being a wife. I had to become a witness. I had to start my own planning. I went to the laundry room and sat on the floor. I cried for 10 minutes. Then I wiped my face. I picked up the phone. That was the day the old Dorothy died, and the new Dorothy was born. I was done making excuses for a man who wanted to bury me. I was ready to find the truth, no matter how much it hurt, because the truth was the only thing that could set me free. This section covers the detective phase. We focus on the secret investigation, the cold realization, and the moment Dorothy sees her husband's new life with her own eyes. I started my mission in the laundry room. It was the only place I could be alone. The hum of the dryer covered my voice. I felt like a spy. I called the number my friend had whispered to me. My fingers shook so hard I pressed the wrong buttons. I felt like I was betraying him. Then I remembered the bank notice. The betrayal had already happened. I was just responding to the fire he started. A woman answered the phone with a calm, professional voice. She was Sarah's assistant. "I need help," I whispered into the receiver. "My husband is trying to erase me." I heard the dryer finish its cycle. The house went silent. I held my breath. 3 days later, I sat in a small office. It was tucked away in a building I had passed 1,000 times. Sarah didn't look like the lawyers on TV. She had sharp eyes and a kind smile. She didn't pity me when I told my story. She didn't gasp when I showed her the bank notice. She just listened. "Dorothy," she said, leaning across the mahogany desk, "he is playing a very old game. He wants you to feel small. He wants you to give up." I told her I didn't want to give up. I told her I had worked for every brick of our house. She nodded and took a long sip of coffee. Then she gave me the most important advice of my life. Do not warn him. Do not accuse him of anything. Do not let him see you cry. A man who is stealing will only steal faster if he feels the door closing, she warned. I realized I had to be a ghost in my own home. I went home and I became a shadow. I cooked his favorite roast beef that night. I even smiled when he told a joke. Inside, my heart was screaming. I bought a plain notebook from the grocery store. I hid it under a loose board in the pantry. I started writing down dates. I recorded every single lie. I noticed how he would leave for work at 7 p.m. I recorded the mileage on his car. The math never matched the distance to the office. I started checking the mail before the postman even left the driveway. I found more hidden notices. I took photos of every single one with my phone. My hands would shake as the camera clicked. I felt like a criminal in my own kitchen, but I knew I was just a woman gathering her life. One evening, Arthur said he had a late client meeting. He spent 20 minutes in front of the mirror. He was whistling a song I didn't know. He looked younger. He looked energized by his secrets. After he pulled out of the driveway, I stood by the window. I grabbed my car keys. I didn't plan to follow him. My hands just turned the wheel on their own. I drove toward the highway, staying 3 cars behind his silver Mercedes. He didn't turn toward the construction site. He turned toward a small Italian restaurant near the river. It was a place we used to go for birthdays. I parked across the street under a dark oak tree. I sat in the dark with the heater running. My throat felt like it was full of dry sand. I saw him through the large front window. He was sitting at a corner table. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at her.
She was the woman with the smirk. She looked like a bright, shiny new toy. Arthur was leaning forward, laughing in a way he hadn't laughed with me in years.
He reached across the white tablecloth. He took her hand and kissed her knuckles. I felt a cold crack inside my chest. It was a clean break. 28 years of memories flashed before my eyes. The births of our children, the lean winters, the shared dreams, all of it was being traded for a steak dinner. I watched her touch his wrist. She acted like she belonged there. She acted like she had earned the right to sit in my place. I felt sick. I didn't jump out of the car. I didn't cause a scene. I just sat there and watched my marriage die under the glow of a neon sign. I went home before he did. I sat at the kitchen table in the dark. I waited until the clock changed numbers. My mind was finally perfectly clear. He wasn't sneaking around like a guilty man. He moved like a man who had already decided I was dead. He was already living his afterlife. By the time his headlights hit the driveway, I was in bed. I pretended to be asleep. I felt the bed sink as he lay down beside me. He smelled like garlic, red wine, and that sharp cologne. I felt a wave of disgust so strong I had to bite my lip to stay silent. The next morning, I called Sarah. "I saw them," I said. The next morning, I called Sarah. "I saw them," I said. My voice was steady now. "I saw everything. Tell me what I need to do next."
Sarah told me to look for the blue folder. She said Arthur was too arrogant to destroy the original partnership papers. He likely kept them in a safe.
"If you find those papers, Dorothy, you don't just get the house, you get the kingdom," she said. I knew where the safe was hidden. It was behind a fake panel in the basement. Arthur thought I never went down there. He thought the stairs were too steep for my old knees. I waited until he went to a golf tournament. I took a flashlight and a heavy screwdriver. I spent 4 hours trying to guess the combination. I tried his birthday. No. I tried the kids' birthdays. No. Then I tried the date he started the company. The heavy metal lock clicked. The door swung open. Inside was a stack of cash, a passport, and a thick blue folder. I opened it and saw my own signature from 1998. I wasn't just a wife. I was a 50% shareholder. He had been trying to forge my name on new documents to dilute my power. He was a thief. I took the folder to the local library. I made copies of every single page. I sent the originals to Sarah's office via certified mail that afternoon. When Arthur came home, he was humming again. He patted my shoulder and called me good old Dorothy. He had no idea the trap was set. He thought he was the hunter. He thought I was the prey. He didn't realize that a grandmother from Iowa knows exactly how to handle a snake. I went back to the laundry room one last time. I folded his shirts with perfect creases. I was done crying. I was ready for the show to start. I looked in the mirror. My eyes didn't look old anymore. They looked sharp. They looked like they were ready for a fight he couldn't win. Arthur wanted a divorce. He wanted to take everything I owned. He was about to find out that the everything he wanted actually belonged to me. The next week, the papers arrived. He slid them across the dinner table like he was serving a bill. "It's time to move on," he said coldly. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just looked at the papers and then at him. "Yes, Arthur," I said. "I think it's finally time to move on." He smiled, thinking I had surrendered. He had no idea that Sarah was already filing our response. He was walking into a storm he couldn't see. I packed a small bag, not to leave, but to be ready. I was counting down the hours until we stood before the judge. The truth was coming. I thought about the girl with the smirk. I wondered if she knew she was dating a man who was about to lose his empire. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. But then I remembered the bank notice. I remembered the kiss at the Italian restaurant. My pity vanished like mist in the morning sun. I was ready. The blue folder was safe. Sarah was prepared. And Arthur? Arthur was still wearing that navy suit, thinking he was a king.
The sun began to set on our final night as a married couple. I sat on the porch and watched the corn sway in the wind. I was at peace.
Tomorrow, the world would know who built the business. Tomorrow, the smirk would disappear. Tomorrow, I would finally be free of his shadow. The show was about to start, and I had a front row seat to the most satisfying ending in the history of Polk County. In this section, we build the tension to a boiling point. We focus on the arrogance of Arthur and the Mistress, and the silent strength Dorothy gathers before the storm hits. The days leading up to the hearing were the longest of my life. Arthur stopped pretending to be a husband. He treated me like a houseguest who had overstayed her welcome. He would talk loudly on his phone in the kitchen. He discussed their new life while I stood 3 feet away. He spoke about moving to a penthouse in the city. He mentioned a private club he wanted to join. He talked about buying a boat. He acted like the money was already in his pocket. He was spending a ghost's fortune. I watched him from the shadows of our home. I saw him packing his bags into the Mercedes. He was taking the expensive crystal we bought in Switzerland. He was taking the leather-bound books from the library. He was stripping the house of its history. He was leaving me with the empty shelves and the dust. Every time I felt a spark of anger, I touched my handbag. I felt the shape of the USB drive. I remembered Sarah's voice. Let him be arrogant. Arrogance makes people messy. He became very messy. He started leaving the Mistress's dry cleaning in the back of the car. He didn't even bother to hide the tickets for their weekend getaways. One afternoon, the woman herself showed up at my front door. She didn't ring the bell. She just walked into my garden. She looked at my hydrangeas with disgust. Arthur says these are high maintenance, she said, lighting a cigarette. She looked at me like I was a weed she was about to pull from the ground. She didn't know my name. She just called me the X. She talked about the renovations she wanted to do to my kitchen. She wanted to tear down the walls. I stood there with my gardening shears in my hand. I felt a cold, sharp urge to tell her the truth. I wanted to see her face when I mentioned the blue folder. But I remembered my promise to Sarah. I stayed silent. I just nodded and went back to my roses. The house is yours to dream about, I said quietly. She laughed, a high, tinkling sound that made my skin prickle. She thought I was defeated. She thought she was the new queen of the castle. Arthur came out of the house and kissed her right in front of me. He didn't even look at my face. He looked at her like she was the future. He looked at me like I was the past, a boring, gray past that was finally being deleted. I watched them drive away together, laughing in the sunlight. I went back inside and sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I didn't need them. I could see the path ahead of me perfectly. I spent that night writing in my notebook. I wrote down the names of the people Arthur had been paying under the table. I listed the hidden assets. I knew he was planning to tell the judge that the company was failing. He was going to claim he was nearly bankrupt. He wanted to pay me nothing. But he forgot that I was the one who kept the books for 20 years. I knew where every dollar was buried. I knew the names of every shell company. The next morning, Arthur came into the kitchen. He was wearing a new gold watch. He looked at me and sighed like I was a difficult child. "Dorothy," he said, checking his reflection in the toaster, "my lawyer says you're being difficult about the settlement. Just sign the papers and go to your sisters." "I built this company from nothing," he continued. "You were just the wife. You lived a good life on my sweat and my hard work. Be grateful." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had once promised to protect me. I saw a stranger with a cold heart and a cheap soul. "I am grateful, Arthur," I said, my voice as steady as a heartbeat. "I am grateful for everything I've learned about you in the last few months." He scoffed and walked out. He didn't understand. He thought I was being emotional. He didn't realize I was being mathematical.
I called Sarah that afternoon. He's moving the offshore funds, I told her. I have the transfer codes from his desk drawer. He did it this morning. I heard Sarah typing on the other end. He's handing us the rope to hang him with, Dorothy. He's committing fraud in real time. This is beautiful. We spent the rest of the day finalizing the surprise. We weren't just going for a divorce anymore. We were going for a full corporate audit. I felt a strange sense of peace. The house was quiet. The memories were packed away in my heart. I was ready to leave the shell of my old life. I looked at a photo of us from 20 years ago. We were standing in front of the garage. We were covered in sawdust, and we were smiling. I didn't hate that version of Arthur. I mourned him. I mourned the man who valued my signature on a contract. I mourned the partner I had lost. But the man in the navy suit, the man with the mistress, he was a ghost, and I was done living in a haunted house. I packed a small suitcase with my most precious things, my mother's jewelry, my children's baby photos, the blue folder. Everything else could be replaced. I realized that Arthur had spent years trying to make me feel small. He wanted me to believe I was nothing without him. He wanted me to be afraid. But fear is a funny thing. Once you face it, it loses its power. I wasn't afraid of the courtroom. I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was excited. I went to bed early that last night. I slept like a baby. I didn't dream of Arthur. I dreamed of a new garden in a new place. I dreamed of flowers that didn't need his permission to grow. I dreamed of a life where I didn't have to check the mail for lies. When the sun rose on the morning of the hearing, I felt a surge of energy. I dressed slowly. I put on my best pearls. I looked like a lady. But underneath the pearls and the soft dress, I was a warrior. I was a bookkeeper, and I was about to show Arthur the true cost of betrayal. I walked out of the house and didn't look back. I knew the next time I saw this driveway, everything would be different. The truth was waiting. I arrived at the courthouse 30 minutes early. I wanted to feel the ground under my feet. I wanted to be ready for the moment the doors opened. I saw the silver Mercedes pull into the lot. I saw the mistress jump out, looking like she was going to a party. I saw Arthur adjust his tie. They were laughing. They were confident. They thought the game was over. They didn't know that the show was just about to begin. I sat on the bench and waited for Sarah. My heart was steady. My hands were still. The blue folder was tucked safely in my lap. Arthur walked toward me, his smile wide and fake. The mistress smirked at me from behind her sunglasses. I didn't flinch. I just waited.
"Today is the day, Dorothy," Arthur said. "Are you ready to say goodbye to it all?" I looked him right in the eye.
Yes, Arthur, I replied. I'm ready to say goodbye to the lies. Are you? He just laughed and walked toward the courtroom.
He had no idea. The man who thought he was taking everything was about to find out he had already lost it all. The show starts now. This is the climax. This is where your watch time will peak as the villain finally falls. We will focus on the dramatic reveal of the blue folder and the destruction of Arthur's lies. The courtroom doors felt like the entrance to a tomb. It was cold inside. The air was dry. It felt like a place where only the cold, hard facts could survive. Arthur sat at the defense table. He looked like a king on a throne. He leaned back and crossed his legs. He was whispering to the mistress in the front row. She giggled and blew him a kiss. She looked at me and winked. It was a cruel, playful wink. She thought I was already defeated. She was very wrong. The judge entered the room. Her name was Judge Miller. She had eyes like flint. She looked like a woman who could smell a lie from a mile away. Arthur's lawyer stood up first. He was a man with a booming voice. He talked about Arthur's brilliant career. He talked about Arthur's tireless work ethic. He painted a picture of a man who built an empire alone. He called me a domestic assistant. He said I was lucky to have lived in such a house.
My client built this firm with his own 2 hands, the lawyer shouted. Mrs. Dorothy was merely a passenger. She deserves a small settlement and nothing more. I looked at Arthur. He was nodding along. He looked so proud of himself. He really believed the story they were telling. He believed I was just a passenger. Then Sarah stood up. She didn't shout. She didn't move fast. She just opened the blue folder on her desk. The room went very, very quiet.
Your Honor, Sarah said. Her voice was calm. It was the voice of a storm before the lightning hits. We have heard a very interesting fairy tale today.
But I would like to show the court the foundation of that fairy tale, she continued. She walked toward the judge's bench. She held up a single paper. This is the original partnership agreement from 1998, Sarah stated. It was signed in a garage. It was signed by both Arthur and Dorothy. Arthur's lawyer jumped up. That document was superseded, he cried. Arthur's face went pale. He leaned forward. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the table. Actually, Sarah said it was not. My client never signed the restructuring papers. We have the forensic proof that her signature on the new deeds was forged.
The judge leaned forward. She took the paper. She looked at Arthur. The silence in the room was heavy. You could hear the clock ticking on the wall.
Mr. Arthur, the judge said. Her voice was like ice. Is this your signature next to your wife's? Is this the original agreement of a 50-50 split?
Arthur tried to speak. He cleared his throat. He looked at his lawyer. He looked at the mistress. His mouth moved, but no sound came out. I don't recall, he finally stammered. His kingly posture began to crumble. He looked like a man who had suddenly realized the floor was made of glass.
But Sarah wasn't finished. She reached into the blue folder again. She pulled out the bank records I had found in the laundry room and the basement.
Your Honor, she said, while Mr. Arthur was telling his wife the company was failing, he was moving millions into this shell company, Arthur's Holdings LLC.
She handed over the transfer receipts. He was using this hidden money to pay for a luxury penthouse. He was using it to buy diamonds for his companion. The mistress in the front row stopped smirking. She looked at the floor. She looked at the exit. She realized the money was not his. It was ours.
This is not a simple divorce, the judge said. This is a case of systematic fraud. Mr. Arthur, you have attempted to swindle your partner and this court.
Arthur stood up. She's just a housewife, he yelled. She doesn't know how to run a company. I did the work. I made the deals. The judge banged her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. Sit down, Mr. Arthur, she barked. Your wife's name is on every brick of that building. I looked at Arthur. He looked small. He looked old. The navy suit didn't make him look like a king anymore. It made him look like a thief.
The mistress stood up and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back at Arthur once. She was gone the second she saw the money disappearing.
Arthur watched her go. He looked like he had been slapped. He had traded his loyal partner for a woman who wouldn't even stay for the verdict.
The judge began to speak. She didn't just grant the divorce. She ordered an immediate freeze on every account Arthur owned. She ordered a full audit. Mrs. Dorothy, the judge said, looking at me, you are the 50% owner of the construction firm. You will remain in the family home. Mr. Arthur will leave today. I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was the weight of 28 years of being told I was nothing. It was the weight of his lies.
I looked at Sarah. She gave me a tiny wink. We had done it. The blue folder had done its job. The show was over, and I had won.
Arthur put his head in his hands. He was shaking. He had walked into this room to take everything from me. Instead, he was leaving with nothing. He had lost his company. He had lost his house. He had lost his mistress. And he had lost the only person who truly loved him for who he was. The bailiff stepped toward him. Mr. Arthur, you need to follow me.
he said. Arthur stood up slowly. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He walked past me. He didn't say a word. He couldn't even look me in the eye. The smell of his expensive cologne was gone. All I smelled was fear. I stood up and smoothed my dress. I felt tall. I felt strong. I felt like the girl I was back in the garage in 1998. The girl with the dreams. I walked out of that courtroom. I didn't look at the mistress's empty seat. I didn't look at Arthur's broken lawyer. I just looked at the light. Outside, the Iowa sun was shining. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like a new beginning. I wasn't just the wife anymore. I was Dorothy. The judge banged her gavel. The sound was like a gunshot. "Sit down, Mr. Arthur," she barked. "Your wife's name is on every brick of that building." I looked at Arthur. He looked small. He looked old. The navy suit didn't make him look like a king anymore. It made him look like a thief. The mistress stood up and walked out of the courtroom. She didn't look back at Arthur once. She was gone the second she saw the money disappearing. Arthur watched her go. He looked like he had been slapped. He had traded his loyal partner for a woman who wouldn't even stay for the verdict. The judge began to speak. She didn't just grant the divorce. She ordered an immediate freeze on every account Arthur owned. She ordered a full audit. "Mrs. Dorothy," the judge said, looking at me, "you are the 50% owner of the construction firm. You will remain in the family home. Mr. Arthur will leave today." I felt a weight lift off my chest. It was the weight of 28 years of being told I was nothing. It was the weight of his lies. I looked at Sarah. She gave me a tiny wink. We had done it. The blue folder had done its job. The show was over, and I had won. Arthur put his head in his hands. He was shaking. He had walked into this room to take everything from me. Instead, he was leaving with nothing. He had lost his company. He had lost his house. He had lost his mistress. And he had lost the only person who truly loved him for who he was. The bailiff stepped toward him. "Mr. Arthur, you need to follow me," he said. Arthur stood up slowly. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 10 minutes. He walked past me. He didn't say a word. He couldn't even look me in the eye. The smell of his expensive cologne was gone. All I smelled was fear. I stood up and smoothed my dress. I felt tall. I felt strong. I felt like the girl I was back in the garage in 1998. The girl with the dreams. I walked out of that courtroom. I didn't look at the mistress's empty seat. I didn't look at Arthur's broken lawyer. I just looked at the light. Outside, the Iowa sun was shining. The air tasted sweet. It tasted like a new beginning. I wasn't just the wife anymore. I was Dorothy. And Dorothy was finally going home. The house was mine, the business was mine, and most importantly, my future was mine. I realized then that Arthur didn't just underestimate my brain. He underestimated my heart. He didn't realize that a heart that loves can also fight. If you are going through a storm right now, listen to me. Do not let them make you feel small. Do not let them tell you that you are nothing. You are the foundation. You are the builder. And when the truth finally comes out, you will be the one standing in the sun. Arthur's best day had become his worst nightmare, and my worst day had become the beginning of the rest of my beautiful life. I got into my car and turned on the radio. I drove past the Italian restaurant. I didn't stop. I had a much better place to be. I was going home to sit on my porch. I was going to watch the sunset. And for the first time in 28 years, I was going to be happy. The show was over. The truth had won. And this American granny was just getting started. I pulled into my driveway that evening. The house looked different. It didn't look like a prison anymore. It looked like a castle. My castle. I sat in my car for a long time. I just listened to the engine cool down. Click, click, click. It sounded like the world resetting itself. I realized I didn't have to hurry inside.
I didn't have to start dinner for a man who didn't respect me. I was finally on my own time. I walked up the front steps. I used my key. I felt the weight of the metal in my hand. This house was built with my sweat and his. But now it was only mine. I walked through the rooms. I saw the empty shelves where Arthur had taken the books. I didn't feel sad. The empty space felt like a fresh page. It felt like a room that was waiting for a new story to be written. I opened the windows. I wanted the smell of his cologne to leave. I wanted the smell of the Iowa fields to come back in. I wanted to feel the wind. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I sat at the table where Arthur had slid the divorce papers. I smiled at the memory. He thought he was the lion. He thought I was the lamb. He didn't realize that a mother lion looks like a lamb until you touch her cubs, or her company, or her dignity. I looked at the blue folder sitting on the counter. It was my silent hero. It was my voice. The phone rang an hour later. It was Arthur. I didn't recognize the number, but I knew his heavy breathing. He sounded tired and very old. "Dorothy," he stammered. "The bank froze everything. I can't even get a hotel room. The girl, she's gone. She won't answer my calls." I didn't feel a surge of joy. I didn't feel a surge of anger. I just felt a deep, quiet sense of peace. The balance was restored. "Arthur," I said, my voice calm and steady, "you told me today was your best day. I hope you enjoyed the first half of it." "What am I supposed to do?" he asked. He sounded like a child lost in the woods. He had spent 28 years relying on my strength. "You should do what I did, Arthur," I replied. "You should learn how to build something from nothing. Maybe it will make you a man." I hung up the phone. I didn't block him. I didn't need to. He had no power over me anymore. He was just a ghost in a navy suit. The next few months were busy. I took over the construction firm. The employees were happy to see me. They knew I was the one who cared. I found out Arthur had been cutting corners on safety. I spent the first month fixing his mistakes. I made the company strong again. I didn't buy a Ferrari. I didn't buy a penthouse. I bought new equipment for my crews. I treated them like the family they were. The Smirk was spotted a few weeks later. She was seen at a bar with a new millionaire. She was a shark. Sharks never stop swimming. I felt sorry for the new man. He didn't know that sharks only care about the blood in the water. They don't care about the heart. I am a grandmother now. I spend my weekends with my grandkids in the garden. I tell them stories about honesty. I tell them stories about work. I show them the blue folder sometimes. I tell them it's not just paper. I tell them it's a reminder that you must always protect your truth. Arthur lives in a small apartment now. He works for another firm. He's not the boss anymore. He's just another man in a suit. Sometimes I see him at the grocery store. He looks away. He can't handle the light in my eyes. He can't handle my peace. I've learned that life is like a ledger. It always balances out in the end. You just have to be patient enough to wait for the math. To every woman watching this, you are not just anything. You are the architect. You are the bookkeeper. You are the heart of the home. If they try to make you feel small, remember my story. Remember that a blue folder and a quiet lawyer can move mountains. You have a strength inside you that is older than the hills. You have a wisdom that no smirk can ever match. Trust your gut. And most of all, never stop watching the mail. The truth is always there, waiting for someone brave enough to open the envelope. My dear friends, thank you for sitting with me today. It has been a long journey from that courtroom hallway to this peaceful porch. This story is for everyone who has ever been underestimated. It's for everyone who has been told they aren't enough. I see you. We are building a beautiful family here at American Granny Stories. We want to reach 1,000 subscribers this month to keep sharing these truths. If you believe that Arthur got exactly what he deserved, please hit that subscribe button right now. Join our circle of strength. Also, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell me where you are watching from.
I read every single message you send. Have you ever had to find a blue folder in your own life? Tell me your story. Your words might help someone else find their courage today. Don't forget to like this video and share it with a friend who needs to know she is a warrior. Let's get this story to 1 million views together. The world needs more stories of justice. The world needs to know that the quiet ones are the ones who change the ending. I'll be right back here on the porch next week with a brand new story. It's a tale about a secret inheritance and a family that learned the hard way. Until then, keep your head high, keep your heart open, and always, always keep a copy of your own signature. This is Dorothy from American Granny Stories. I love you all, God bless you, and I will see you in the next one.